Paso a Paso podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paso a Paso podcast. My name is Miles and I'm happy to be here with you again as we enter our continued series, but for the year 2021. Really excited to have Aurora here today and excited to hear all that she wants to share with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Aurora Valdez, and I am the Community Wellness Manager for the Taos Division of Health and Community Services.
Wonderful. And thanks so much for taking the time to join us today and share what you do, what you'd like for the listeners to hear. And thanks everybody listening, whether on KNCE or our podcast, Paso Podcast. Please subscribe, like, rate, all that stuff. And also I want to give a shout out, if I can, real briefly, just to the RT Keeler Foundation, who did help initiate this podcast last year in 2020. Aurora, you're involved in so many different topics. Today, though, I'm under the impression that we're going to discuss the 100% Community Initiative. Is that the right title for it?
Yes, 100% Taos County.
Okay. And just share with us kind of the basics of what does that mean, the 100% Taos County? How did you get involved in it? What is it aiming to do?
Okay, so the 100% Taos County Initiative is a countywide initiative aimed at increasing access to 10 vital services. 5 of those services are for surviving, like food, housing, behavioral health care, medical care, and dental care, and transportation. And then there's 5 services for thriving. And those services are parent supports, early childhood learning programs, family-centered schools, youth mentors, and job training and higher education. And the idea is that if 100% of the community, 100% of Taos County families have access to these 10 services, we should see a reduction in adverse childhood experiences and all the things that are symptomatic of childhood trauma. And then we'll see an increase in all of those indicators that illustrate a beautiful, thriving, healthy community.
That's wonderful. And I'm excited to talk about the breadth and the diversity of all the things you're including in that. I also love that I heard you mention the concepts of not only surviving, but thriving. And it sounds as though those are two perspectives or ways in which people live. And it sounds like the goal of the 100% is that people are not only surviving, but thriving. And it takes a lot of different topics to consider to get us all to that place. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. So my favorite example of this is, so let me ask you, Miles, say that I'm a person that came up to you and said, I would like to start getting healthy. What are a few things that I can do to live a healthier lifestyle?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I would probably first throw out a few more obvious things like paying attention to what they put inside their bodies, including food, whether they get exercise, also if there's something they enjoy doing in life. That's important to me. But I imagine a lot of that would have to deal specifically with learning more about what it is they do from day to day and what their current status looks like.
Right. So you'd probably say that perhaps I should get 8 hours of sleep a night. It would be great if I'm totally bad at this, but get 8 glasses of water a day. You mentioned paying attention to what I put into my body. So it'd be great to have 5 fruits and vegetables, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Probably it'd be great for me to at least walk around for 30 minutes a day. It would be great if I was safe and in a safe household. It would be great if I did some meditation every day. So you can see what it means to be a healthy person is layered. There's so many layers. There's so many strategies. And so that's sort of the point of the 100% Community Initiative. It is the idea that there's no one problem that can be attributed to a single cause. And instead, it's like a collection of causes. There's a collection of things that need to go right in order for people to live a healthy life, and also for communities to be healthy. And so that's kind of the idea of the 100% Community Initiative. Think about all of the things that it takes all of the things that need to go right in order for a 5-year-old to show up ready for kindergarten. They need to be healthy and all the things that that means to be healthy. They need to be drinking clean water and have nutritious, healthy food available to them. They need to be in a safe household. It would be great if their parents were reading to them for 20 minutes a day, every day. And, the family was healthy and they weren't, there wasn't a lot of like stressors or trauma. It would be great if there was some extended family support that a family could lean on. And so you can just kind of think about, it's not just one agency that's responsible for kids showing up healthy and ready to learn. It really truly does take a community, and that's what this approach is all about. It's increasing collaboration and communication in a very intentional way to focus on ensuring that all of our families are able to lead that healthy life and have access to these beautiful programs that I know that you've had on your show that do wonderful work in the community. We just want to make sure that every person in this community who needs a particular service has access to those services and programs. So that's really the main idea behind the 100% Community Initiative.
Yeah. Thanks for the explanation on that. I completely agree, and it's very exciting to hear. And thank you for taking on the role of bringing all of these various issues together. When you mention the various services that exist and ensuring that they exist so that people can utilize them, etc., something that I've gathered, and I'd love your perspective on it, but is that sometimes struggling as an individual or a family member is a very lonely experience. And sometimes it's, I don't want to say avoided, but people are not so quick to occasionally seek support that may be available for any one issue out of shame or guilt or feeling bad about themselves or other reasons. Family navigation is something that I hear a lot of talk about in Taos, and I'm curious, as we look at all the various services that are available and the ones that might be needed to become available if they don't exist now, what have you learned, or what's your perspective on that connection between those who provide the services and those who may be able to utilize them but may not so quickly jump into that?
So one of the kind of cornerstones of the initiative is data and being data driven. So part of this initiative is informed by the Resilient Community Experiences Survey that asks that question exactly. It asks people to rate access to each of these 10 services that I had mentioned earlier. So for instance, we asked a question here at Taos Pueblo when we conducted the Resilient Community Experiences survey here. We asked, how do you rate access to early childhood programs that strengthen early learning? And people could rate it from very accessible, accessible, not very accessible, not accessible, and I don't know. So even though we did have a majority of people say that it was accessible, there's still a good portion of people who said it was not accessible. So then, in addition to every one of those questions, we asked what were some things that could make the service more accessible. And for early childhood programs in particular, people had said, I don't know where to get this service. So that access, so that's a barrier that we have already identified, and that's a barrier that early childhood programs in our community can address. It's easy, it's tangible, it's not invisible. There's also, you have to be real with these. When you get this data, you have to be really real. Some people said customer service was an issue. And so that's a very real, easy, I don't want to say an easy fix, but it's a fix nonetheless. It's something that you could do. And that's part of people feeling welcome to the service and having the service be provided to our community in a way that's dignifying.
Great. Yeah, great points, Aurora. And it sounds as though also that a key part to all of that is customer service. Can you explain more about your perspective on that?
Sure. So I was just kind of thinking about customer service being identified as a barrier to some of these programs, just as something that programs could take on and address in order to increase access among some of these other larger barriers. I did want to also mention that knowing how a service is beneficial and information about where to get the service, which is really great because it's kind of what your podcast is doing, helping people understand where to get the service and how this is beneficial, is increasing access to the public about what these programs do and how they can be beneficial to families. So those are just some tangible strategies that some of these programs can take on, and these are just some results that were yielded from this large community survey.
Would you say that that is where things are now? That there are a large group of beneficial services that are accessible to people, whether they know how to access them or not, and in other words, is increasing the ease of access and the awareness of these services a first step towards obtaining that 100% community?
I would say definitely. It's not enough for a service to just simply exist. It does have to be accessible and available to all people in our community. And if we do focus on getting the people who are most in need and connected to these very important services, that I do believe that we'll see a change in turning the curve. For example, it's food. Like, we want to make sure that people are food secure. A huge thing that I know gets talked about a lot is housing. Making sure that people, and kids especially, are in stable housing can yield some really positive health outcomes. Same thing with having access to medical and dental care, and of course transportation. It really is like its own service, so to speak, but it really encompasses all of these things. So think about where the bus stop goes, and playing off of our current example of early childhood. If you are walking out of your building right now, can you get to a bus stop? So is your service accessible by public transportation? So maybe we can have a really intentional conversation about how people are getting to our programs. And there's a lot of really great ideas that come out of the 100% Community Initiative. And as a next step, it really is increasing access. And the way that we're going to get there is through establishing a baseline and seeing how accessible all of these services are at a community level first. So I mentioned the Resilient Community Experiences Survey, and that is something that we conducted here at Taos Pueblo as part of our community health assessment. But it would be great to see something like that conducted in Taos County.
Right, and it sounds like that as the initiative gains greater recognition in Taos, as it is in the region and beyond, I've heard some talk that there might be greater opportunity with the county and with additional people getting on board and supporting the work you're doing, for that to become something people are more and more aware of and supportive of. Is that the sense that you get from the momentum currently?
Yeah, and I want to say again that it's building off of strengths that are already based here in our community. So there are already groups who are working on a lot of these things, and we just want to build off of those groups. And we want somebody from each of those groups to be talking to people from the other groups. And so we would like to have a team of action team leaders, a table of action team leaders from each of these different sectors. I want people from the agricultural community who want to increase access to food to be talking to the people from community schools, and people from job training and higher education action teams to be talking with people from the medical dental field. And so it's really just like increasing collaboration between all these sectors that are currently not really talking to each other. What if we had say, as we're building apartments and trying to address affordable housing here in Taos, what if we had childcare centers built into them? So what if we had those kind of like cross-sector conversations? How do we make sure that they have a bus stop? How do we make sure the bus goes where we want it to go? And so it really is just kind of at a bit of like a population level conversation. anyway, to answer your question, it's building off of existing collaboratives and alliances and coalitions, and trying to get these groups of people who are very passionate about this one thing to talk to another group who are passionate about these other things, but to have the conversation focused on access. Everybody's mission statement for nonprofits in Taos is they all want a Taos that looks like this, and it's not just we want a portion of Taos to look like this. It's we want a Taos County that looks like this. We want a town of Taos. We want Taos youth, and so we're just really trying to help these. It's just more intentional, collaborative relationship building to help other organizations do their work.
Great. If someone's listening and they're not as tied into the work of organizations that provide services or things like that as you and I are, how would you suggest they get involved in supporting all of the things you're mentioning today and helping towards that goal?
So first of all, I would just like to encourage people to visit the ANNAage8.org website. So it's the Anna Age 8 Institute, and it's just spelled out ANNAAGEEIGHT.org to learn more about 100% Community Initiative and to learn about preventing ACEs. We do have a page, which is really cool. So if you go to ANNA8.org/NM-Taos, you'll find a little bit of the startup information that we have going on. People can also email me at Aurora, AURORA, @taospueblo.com if they want to get more information. And I can talk about this for days, and it's my favorite thing. So if you call me or email me, I would be so happy to talk to anybody about it.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Aurora, for joining us on this first time that we've discussed 100% community here on the Paso podcast. And we certainly hope that as things progress and as certain needs come up, feel free to reach out and look forward to sharing this information in new ways with our listeners.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And like I said, we all want the same thing, and this is just kind of an intentional plan to get there.
Great. Well, thanks for leading the way, and I look forward to staying in touch about it, and thanks for all of your work you're doing for our community.
Paso a Paso podcast.